How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name's Josh Hutchinson, and I've got John Binkle with me here today. How you doing, John?
I'm good, buddy. I just got back from 48 hours in New York City. Got my dogs back from my mother-in-law. We're back in the swing of things, man. It's playoff
That,
time.
yeah, man, that's a whirlwind of a trip. So, what were you able to see in 48 hours?
So my wife saw Chicago, the Broadway musical, with my
Oh,
stepmom,
wow.
and my dad and I went to a pub on that street and watched hockey and basketball and had a beer or two instead. And my wife and I went to the top of the Empire State Building, which was I can't believe I'm saying this about New York City, but it was surprisingly expensive to do that. But I had seen, other than one of the new buildings, which is now apparently the tallest lookout in New York City now. I had seen every other top of the building other than the Empire State Building, because it was just like one that we didn't go see. So that was cool to do with her. We got some great photos. And my dad is a like multi-level chef, and he works for a excuse me, like a big ceramic pizza oven company out of Baltimore. And
Okay.
so they were doing this massive food show in New York, where they were showcasing the ovens. So we went to this giant food show for free, which was dope. And my wife and I are both in the food service industry, so it was interesting for us, like on a professional level. And it was also cool because, unlike a trade show where they just want to like give you a pen with their logo on it, there's like a ton of samples and stuff like that. So it's kind of, I wouldn't call it interactive, but it's basically just kind of like a tasting food court, like it's going to Costco, but this massive conference center for it. So it was
That
cool.
sounds awesome.
We had a really good time. It was a really quick turnaround, but somehow, with exception to the Empire State Building, we didn't spend a ton of money. So it was a great trip overall.
That's awesome. I feel like I kind of had that experience in London, England, where we tried to fit in. We basically did a day trip when we were in England. We went over there for a week and a half for my sister's wedding. My sister lives in England, and I we spent one day in London, and it was basically taking the tube around to all the different spots. We'd get out, take a look, get back on the tube, keep going. It was a whirlwind of a day, but we saw Abbey Road, we saw Baker Street, we saw Buckingham Palace. It felt like we touched on all of the iconic sites, but
Yeah,
it was hard to take it all in because it was so fast. It
yeah.
was hard to process. But yeah. Uh, all right, let's talk hockey.
Let's do it.
Thanks again for leaving us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you haven't and you're enjoying our content, please just take a second, leave us a review. We would greatly appreciate it. Also, check out the Apples and Genos Discord server. It's a great place to talk fantasy hockey, get your questions answered, and also receive alerts for when new Apples and Genos content drops. And if you didn't already know, this is Midweek Moves. It is Wednesday, March 8th, and we're talking about schedule maximization, who you should be adding and dropping at this point. For a lot of leagues, you're almost in the playoffs. Some leagues are in the playoffs already, but I would say in most of my leagues, the playoffs are starting next week. So this advice right here is for people that are trying to get into that last playoff spot or trying to clinch a spot at all. So for the rest of the week, the schedule is interesting. There are 11 teams with 3 games, but they all only have one off night. So there's only 2 teams that play on both Friday and Sunday, which are the 2 off nights from Thursday to Sunday, and that is Calgary and Anaheim. But they only play those 2 games. So, I mean, if you want a team with 3 games, if you can fit someone in on the Saturday or the Thursday, it's unlikely. The Saturday has 15 games. Calgary and Anaheim are actually the only teams that don't play on Saturday. So Arizona, Boston, Carolina, New Jersey, Nashville, the Rangers, Ottawa Senators, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Tampa Bay, and Vegas all have 3 games with that one off night. And then in terms of poor schedules, Columbus, Toronto, and Vancouver only have 1 game to finish out the week. And those are all on the Saturday. So you're probably not going to fit anyone from those teams in for the rest of the week. Next week, there are a number of teams that have really good schedules. And this is probably Yeah, I mean, might be your first week of your playoffs. Buffalo has 4 games and 4 off nights. That is the best schedule out of anybody there. The Leafs and the Caps both have 4 games with 3 off nights. Columbus and Colorado both have 4 games with 2 off nights. And then St. Louis and Anaheim both have 3 games with 3 off nights. Now, the poor schedules next week are Detroit and Florida. They only have 2 games. So probably not wanting to pick anyone up going into next week from those teams. But St. Louis, I would say Anaheim is probably the most ideal team to pick up from the end of this week and next week. You can even carry those players over into next week and save an ad because the next 5 games that they have are all on off nights. So that they're going to be really easy to fit into your schedule. So my ad is from Anaheim. It is Cam Fowler, who is 16% rostered. He has 11 points in his last 10 games. And now that Klingberg is gone, he has power play 1 deployment, and his ice time is therefore gone up a bit. He was already getting over 20 minutes a game. He's now getting their last couple of games, he's been 23 to 24 minutes per game. And playing on that power play, I mean, obviously Anaheim they're not a strong team. They're not scoring a ton of goals, but Cam Fowler has been in on a lot lately, and he'll get every opportunity to be in on more. So that's a guy that I would definitely be considering picking up, and probably the most attainable and best Anaheim Duck available. So that's who I'm going with this week.
I can certainly see that. I was just reading the article from Mark Barber, 18 Skaters for us. His 18 Skaters bot had Fowler as a high recommendation as well. So I think that's certainly a quality ad for those of you that are looking to absolutely win this week or looking to prime yourself for next week as well. Emotionally, I don't want to put any of my playoff hopes on an Anaheim Duck, but at that position and with that many games played, all of them on off nights, I mean, the likelihood is that you're going to put him in over no one, right? It's not necessarily Cam Fowler versus someone else. It's Cam Fowler versus not getting a player onto the ice and collecting stats. So I think that's an excellent addition for you. My ad for this week is actually Jack Quinn. I'm more primed for next week. Earnestly, I feel like if you are scrambling to win this last week to make the playoffs, first of all, congratulations for clawing away all your way to the finish. But if it's me, I'm probably adding and dropping day to day and maximizing all the way throughout the week. So it's a little less fluid for suggestion. So I'm just going to go straight into next week. Jack Quinn, line 1 with Skinner and Tage Thompson. He is the power play 2 gunner. They get a decent percentage of the minutes there. It's not an even split. It's not a great second power play unit, but he is the shooter for them. So you're getting those minutes on top of what really matters to me in this case, which is time with Skinner and Tage Thompson. Like you mentioned, in week 22, they have 4 games played and 4 off nights. If your playoff schedule is 22 through 24, they have an excellent 10 games played with 7 off nights. And if your weeks are 23 through 25, 13 games played with 4 off nights. So both of those really, really quality playoff schedules. And there's not really an indication that Alex Tuch is going to come back anytime soon. So you don't have to really worry about whether Jack Quinn is going to lose that space to anyone else. They seem to have solidified their lines going into the playoffs. And if you listen to the show, you know that I am a huge fan of Jack Quinn in general. So seeing him get this kind of deployment really, really gives me the warm feelies in my stomach, fantasy hockey wise.
Yeah, I think we had a hat bet in the preseason episode because we were talking about our Calder Trophy favorites, and I was all over Cole Perfetti. You were all over Jack Quinn, and I think we said that we were going to bet whoever had the most Calder votes at the end of the year.
Okay.
Whoever's guy, they would get a hat, like that. The other person would buy that person a hat. So it looked at the start of the year like I was going to be running away with this. And now Jack Quinn is right in that conversation. So we'll see. Neither of them are going to win the Calder. I
No.
don't think they're even they're even
I'm,
considerations, but they may get top 5 votes.
I'm kind of racking my brain right now for who the favorite would be. I would assume.
I think it's
I
probably Beniers. I
Okay.
don't think there's no one that's running away with it really, but I
Yeah.
think Beniers is probably the favorite at this point. Logan Thompson earlier in the year was,
Yeah. I mean, if
but
he had not been hurt, that would have been my assumption, right?
yeah, he really tailed off and then got hurt, so that kind of hurts his case as well. But Beniers has been pretty solid all year. I think he's probably going to end up with between 50 and 60 points,
Right.
and that'll be the best out of anybody. So almost
Especially
by
with them
default.
being a playoff level team, right? Like that, he
Hmm.
has to get a ton of credit for that.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely, absolutely. So my yeah, I mean, I that being said, I do support a Jack Quinn ad. He's in a great position right now. Anyone playing with Thompson and Skinner, I think, is in a fantastic position. And like you said, Alex Tuck, it doesn't look like he's coming back anytime soon. He's week to week. There's no specific timeline, but and that usually doesn't mean great things. So for Alex Tuck owners, it hurts. But if you're able to pick up Jack Quinn, I would definitely would. Um, my drop for this week is Lucas Raymond. He is 37% rostered, and it's shocking to me that he is still this highly rostered. It's been an interesting year for people that were in the Calder conversation last year because most of them have had a sophomore slump. We see Trevor Zegras hasn't been the same. Trevor Zegras this year hasn't taken the step that we all expected. Mo Sider has been a disappointment. And Lucas Raymond has been a major disappointment. He only has
major.
33 points this year. He has 1 assist in his last 10 games. Detroit has lost 6 in a row and they sold at the deadline. So I don't imagine the vibes there are really super great. You saw that interview with Dylan Larkin. He was pretty upset that Tyler Bertuzzi was not there anymore. His buddy, his line mate. That's not great vibes. And I mean, I imagine that potentially affects the group going forward. They were kind of right in the race to get into the last playoff spot right up until the trade deadline. They sold, and now they've been terrible. So not a great situation in Detroit. Lucas Raymond, even when things were good, I mean, he was not one of the main guys, right? Like he's playing on power play one. He is on line one right now, but man, he doesn't generate much. He doesn't shoot. He doesn't like. I don't know what this guy does. I don't really understand, and I have fallen victim to this multiple times. I drafted him this year being like, okay, this is going to be a value pick, and just nothing. Like he ended up being a drop for me earlier in the season. So for the rest of you 37% in Yahoo that are still hanging on to Lucas Raymond, I think it's time. And just 2 games next week as well. So
Yeah.
he's definitely a guy that you should be cutting at this point.
Yeah, their schedule doesn't get significantly better going through the playoffs after that 2-game stretch. So it's not really something that you're concerned about. If I'm being frank, unless it's Dylan Larkin, there's not really a Red Wing that I have a problem with dropping. And I say that as somebody that's really emotionally attached to Mort Sider as well. Like there's just not a lot to love in Detroit right now, which is really disappointing from a fantasy hockey perspective. It's disappointing from a Red Wings perspective with them having a surge before kind of going off a cliff. And like you mentioned, Larkin seems to be really down, not just like in spirit, but in production as well since that trade. So things do not look good in Detroit. I fully support that drop. My drop for the term is Brandon Hagel. He also has not had a great stretch as of late. He's got 5 shots on goal in the last 6 games, right? Tampa's dropped at least 5 in a row. It might be 6 now. Average time on ice in those last 6 games, 17:39. He hasn't scored in 14 games. He's given you minimal PIMs. He's given you minimal shots, minimal hits, minimal blocks. And he's on a lackluster power play 2 group playing small percentages. That power play 2 group, Corey Perry, Paul, Colton, and Sergachev, right? So there's nothing that's going to carry that to improve. The team itself is really not doing well. They're reeling. They benched their top line as a statement to try and fire things up. And we'll touch on this here in a minute, Hedman got injured as well, right? Things look really bad. But most importantly, In weeks 22 through 24, they've only got 10 games played with one off night. If your playoffs you're looking at, you get to the next level, weeks 23 through 24, they have a league worst 6 games played with 0 off nights. And in 23 through 25, league worst 11 games played with 1 off night, right? So things don't look good for him personally, and fantasy schedule wise could not be worse. So for the 59% of you that are rostering him, and that's down 8% in the last week, it's time to go. Like, I love Brendan Hagel. I've been riding him all year long, but there's just no reason to keep holding on to him right now.
Yeah, agreed. I think there is a situation because they're playing so poor. I think there's a distinct possibility that he could get moved up onto the top line again with Kucherov and Point. In that case, maybe I'm still interested in hanging on to him, but until that happens, I mean, you can't bank on that happening either. That's the other thing. And like you said, their schedule is not great in the coming weeks. So, I mean, it's do or die at this point.
Right.
At this point in the season. So I think he's a guy that you should definitely consider cutting bait on for sure. Let's move on to some other hot topics. Binksy, take us away, buddy.
So after all the trade talk, we're going to go back to some pertinent injuries. For those of you that are following up on players that were traded recently, things are going well for Timo Meyer. Things are going really well for Nino Niederreiter. Anthony Duclair looks good coming back from injury. The other stuff, it's just kind of middle of the road, so not really worth touching on. As far as injuries go, and this one is really pertinent to fantasy hockey for a couple of reasons. Taylor Hall was recently placed on long-term injured reserve with a lower body injury. That makes him not eligible to return until midway through week 23. It's possible that he needs surgery, so it's looking very unlikely that he'll be back before the playoffs. Even if that's really possible and plausible for the Bruins, they don't need to win any more games, so there's no reason to rush him at all. And with bringing in Bertuzzi, there's no guarantee that he slots back into any certain spot in that regard anyway, right? So another injury to touch on, Evander Kane has been skating with the team recently and is expected to return in one of Edmonton's next few games, Thursday against Boston, Saturday against Toronto, or Tuesday against Ottawa. So a tough slate, but he's a tough player. He's been out with a rib injury for a few weeks now. So it's certainly possible that when he comes back, he's a little bit ginger and maybe not throwing the body as much. So something to look out for with Evander Kane. As we mentioned before, Victor Hedman is day-to-day with an upper body injury after leaving Sunday's game against the Hurricanes. And I don't know if you saw what happened to him, but he was retrieving a puck in his own zone, turned to put the puck back up ice, and was checked backwards, kind of corkscrewed, went down into the ice, and then went back into the boards. And he did that on the sidewall and caromed all the way behind the net, where he just kind of slumped face down, right? It looked really bad. So he immediately reached for his lower back while face down on the ice.
Makes
and
sense.
Spent a few minutes on the ice before kind of gingerly skating off, being helped to the locker room, and wasn't on the ice for Tuesday's morning skate and didn't play against the Flyers, right? A lot of times you're thinking, well, it's the Flyers. Do they really need to go, right? But with them being in such a down way, like they would need him out there if he could possibly go. And being that he hit into the boards, it looked like he could have hit his head as well. I'm completely speculating about that. There's not been any notes about that, and he immediately reached for his lower back. But it being day to day in such a vague fashion doesn't give me any confidence at all. So for those of you relying on Hedman, it doesn't look good.
Yeah, not super great. I mean, yeah, at this point in the season, Tampa's probably going to be resting big guys anyways. I'm not concerned about them as a team and the slump that they're having going into the playoffs. But in terms of fantasy, I think I would imagine they're going to hold him out even if he is okay to play. So yeah, I would agree. I think it's concerning for people that are holding Hedman right now.
This last injury note I'm going to leave up to you. I'm hoping you know a little bit more about it than I do.
Yeah, so Ryan O'Reilly broke his finger. He's going to be out 4 weeks. He had some surgery. He blocked a shot from Austin Matthews, or I guess he had an Austin Matthews shot hit him in the hand. It didn't look good at the time. I think a lot of people were concerned that he had a broken hand, like a broken metacarpal, which would be, I mean, that's a lot more concerning. But the fact that it was just a broken finger, and the fact that he's going to be back in time for the playoffs, I think is great for Leaf fans, fans of the team, because it sounds like he'll be ready for the playoffs. But in terms of people that are holding Ryan O'Reilly right now, it sounds like he's not going to be back. He might not even be back the regular season. Like it may be the last week or two. So maybe if your playoffs go right to the end, you might get some value out of Ryan O'Reilly, but I would be dropping him immediately, unless you have the IR plus spots. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't think you're going to get much out of Ryan O'Reilly at this point. You mentioned Timo Meier having success in New Jersey, and Devils fans on Twitter last night were not impressed with Timo Meier.
Really?
Not at all. Yeah, he so in the third period against the Leafs, he turned the puck over on the power play at the blue line to Mitch Marner. And Mitch Marner got a breakaway and scored a shorthanded goal, and then the game was tied with just a few minutes left, and Meier took like just a boneheaded high sticking call, like just I don't know what he was doing with his stick, but the puck was up in the air and he went swinging for it like this, like as if he was swinging a lightsaber, and hit. I can't remember who he hit in the face, but it was just so. It was like, what are you doing, man? And then Austin Matthews scored on the power play, and the Devils lost. So it was. I saw people on Twitter being like, "Go back to San Jose," and I was like, "Wow, that's crazy. That's pretty aggressive." But yeah, I mean, Meier's gonna be fine, and especially with fantasy like that, those type of plays don't really matter in fantasy anyway. So, all right, let's check in with some 0G candidates here. So John Gibson is 45% rostered, which is actually quite an increase in the last month or two. He, over the last 14 days, is number one in the league in Kickupful goalie points, or Kickupful fantasy points for goalies. He has quality starts in 5 out of his last 6 games, and in 3 of those games, he faced 55, 43, and then 55 shots again. In 3 of those quality starts. So he's been facing a ton of shots and has been coming up huge for Anaheim. They have that great schedule. Like I mentioned before, they have those 5 off nights coming up. So if you need a goalie, John Gibson may be a candidate there. I know he's had ups and downs this year. He is a good goalie. He plays on a terrible team, but again, like these other guys that we've harped on this year, like Carl Vamelka and Connor Ingram. I don't know, guys like, yeah, I mean, those are the main guys that we've been talking about. John Gibson may be a viable option there. Aiden Hill, who's 50% rostered, has had quality starts in 9 of his last 10 games. He has a 9.14 on the season. He's been so good. And I was talking about how you needed to pick him up, but he's actually gone down with an injury, and he is day to day. Now it's uncertain whether or not he'll be back by the end of this week. But if not, like, they have crazy injury troubles with their goalies right now. Laurent Brossoit is out, and if Aiden Hill's out, they gotta go with Jonathan Quick. And Jonathan Quick might get a run. I don't know. That's not a good situation for Vegas. Jonathan Quick has just been brutal this year. Maybe the change of scenery helps. I think they won in his one start that he played, but he did allow a few goals late in the game. So I don't know. I'm really not confident in starting Jonathan Quick whatsoever. So not an ideal scenario at all. Jake Allen is 26% rostered. He has six of his last 8 starts for Montreal were quality starts, so he's been playing pretty well lately. Could be an option there. Mads Sogart for Ottawa. Cam Talbot is down with an injury. He's day to day. Sogard, unfortunately, in his last game, had his worst outing of the season against Chicago, where Ottawa lost 5-0, and they just which just crushed their hopes and dreams a little bit of making the playoffs. Like that's just that is a really disappointing loss there. The Kane-less, Domi-less. I mean, they have no players. Seth Jones, I think, had 2 goals. Seth Jones is just playing hero ball right now for Chicago, and it's spoiling their chances of having the best odds of getting Connor Bedard. But yeah, Mads Sogard, I think may see a couple starts here if Talbot isn't able to go. And other than that game, he's been really good this year. So I like Mads Sogard. Yeah. So obviously the timetable is still unclear on Talbot, but definitely keep an eye on the lineup cards. Philip Grubauer, 31% rostered. He has 4 straight wins in Seattle. They have all been quality starts. It seems like he's stolen the starting job back from Martin Jones. So that's a guy that I might be looking long and hard at going into the playoff weeks. Alex Stalock, man. I've talked about this guy a lot of times. Like, he borderline, like, should he be winning the Vezina this year? Like, he's been unbelievable. Unbelievable. He has a 921 in Chicago. Like, are you kidding me? Like, how is that possible? He had a shutout against the Senators the other night, and I think it was 35 saves that he made. Whenever he's been healthy, whenever he hasn't been out with a concussion this year, he's been lights out for Chicago and totally ruining. Like, they should not be starting him at this point. They did not get him to be a good goaltender. They did not sign him to be a good goaltender, and he's been so good this year. It's just proof, man. It's just proof. Goalies are voodoo. You just don't know what's going to happen. Alex Stalock's been out of the league for multiple years, and then he comes in and he's lights out for the worst team in the league. It's mind blowing. So I don't know. Maybe you want to add him for a spot start here and there. It seems like every time he starts, he's amazing. And then Eunice Corpusalo is the other guy I wanted to mention. Phoenix Copley and Corpusalo have split starts so far in LA. So it remains to be seen what their plans are going forward. But I imagine as we get closer to the end of the year, you'll probably see one of them start getting more starts than the other just to get comfortable going into the playoffs. So yeah, definitely keep an eye on LA's goalie situation. But that's it for the 0G candidates. So let's get into the mailbag. I think Binksy pulled some questions about goalies just so we can get some continuity here. So Dingle Dude, our boy Blake Creamer, asks, Sogard, let's hear it, ya buttes. And I guess I kind of mentioned it already. I do kind of like Sogard going forward. Hopefully the Sens can bounce back from that brutal loss to Chicago. What do you think? What are your thoughts on Sogard?
I assume that they go back to Talbot as soon as possible.
As soon as he's back, yeah.
And it being like a really gray area, him being like supposed to start on Monday and then being scratched and not really any indication given for the game tomorrow. I don't have any trust in putting Mads Sogard on my roster. And if there's no question about whether he's going to start or not, I'm still reviewing the other options. I don't have a lot of trust in Sogard. And as you absolutely indicated by them losing 5-0 to the Taylor Radish led Chicago Blackhawks, like that's not great defense there. So I don't love it. I don't love it. I'm going to go other places. I think that, and this leads into the next question. I think if you give me a let's just say a hypothetical between Sogard and Jonathan Quick, I'm going with Quick.
Gotcha. Well, that leads us into the next question from Walnut. Is Quick a must-add with Hill injured? I don't have that same confidence in him. I agree. I absolutely don't have the same confidence in him as I do in Aiden Hill right now. I'm hoping Aiden Hill, this is the thing, the jury's still out on whether or not Aiden Hill is hurt enough to not play the rest of the week. it was kind of a mysterious injury. He didn't leave the game early. He played really well in a loss the other night,
Mm-hmm.
and then just didn't show up to practice the next day. And they said he had a lower body injury. So hard to know at this point whether or not he's actually out at this point. It could be they're just giving him a rest. So, I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts on Quick? You said you take him over Sogard, but would you like? Is that a guy that you're considering picking up at all, like in a vacuum?
Usually, I would have a lot more trust in Vegas defensively in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
But as great as Hill has been over the last few starts, and I believe in Hill, I have all year. Um, they have not been great defensively, right? Like their goaltending has been good with Hill, and they've been scoring enough, but they've not been great defensively. They're giving up a ton of shots, and I don't trust Quick in that environment. Um, Yet again, I'm going to other options on the waiver wire for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. Uh, Googs asks, I feel like Vanacek is back to his old self, and I think that means negatively.
That's the
Um,
tone I'm getting.
like
Yes.
he's playing poorly. Akira Schmid has been stellar all year. Do you see a goaltender controversy? Um, Personally, I'm picking up Schmid for the playoffs as the upside is sky high. So this is looking at the trends for New Jersey over the last little while. You're correct. Akira Schmid has performed better than Vanacek over the last 7-8 games or so. Vanacek is getting the bulk of the starts, like regardless. He's played like even though he was pulled a few games ago for Schmid, and Schmid finished of the game didn't allow a goal, and then Schmid I think had a shutout recently too. But
Yeah, he did.
even so, even so, Vanacek has still started the last couple games in a row. I think that he's their guy right now going into the playoffs. Like they're relying on Vanacek. So to me, they're not going to shift their focus there. Schmid may get a few starts here and there, so I would encourage you not to pick up Schmid. In other words, because like yes, the upside is there. I'm sure like there is potential for him to be a great goalie, but at this point in the season, like you need to play games, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I still think that Vanacek is their guy, and they're going to give him the confidence that he is their guy, and they're going to continue to start him whether or not he's playing well. So um, last night, I watched the game last night against the Leafs. He looked totally fine. He allowed 4 goals, had absolutely no shot on any of those goals. Like there was nothing, none of them were his fault whatsoever. Um, I mean, point blank shot from Austin Matthews on the power play in the slot. Mitch Marner on a breakaway, shorthanded. Kelly Yarncroke with a wide open cage off of like a defensive breakdown where Thomas Tatar took away the pass but didn't really take away the pass. It got through him anyways. So it's like, I mean, what do you do there? What do you do? I think Vanacek will probably be fine. But yeah, like I said, I don't think that there is a goaltending controversy yet.
No, I mean, it probably really feels that way seeing him give up, let's see, over the last 5 games, 4 goals, 4 goals, 5 goals, 3 goals, four
Mm-hmm.
goals. But take into account that he won 3 out of those 5 games, right? So,
Yeah.
like, fantasy wise, it hurts a lot more than it does mentally as a goaltender. Like, yeah, you give up goals, but you still win the game, right? And yeah, you give up 4 goals last night to the Leafs, but like you said, they weren't goals that he, is beating himself up over, right? So in a stretch before that, he won 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 games in a row, right? And in a ton of those, save percentage above 930, right? So yeah, I also have a lot of upside faith in Akira Schmid, but I don't think there's really a controversy here, especially considering the state of the team and how well he has done all season long. He has been fighting off Schmidt and Blackwood all year long, and goalies are not always going to be phenomenal, especially in this back home stretch. The ones that get volume, they tend to fade a little bit, So no, I don't see any controversy there, and I wouldn't knock you if you started Schmidt in a streaming start. I think that's a good situation, and I think he's had a lot of success. I see a lot of upside there, but I don't necessarily feel like Vanacek is close to his old self, quote unquote.
Reese's Pieces asked, this is a fun question. Who's a player you hate for no rational reason? Also would like Blake's opinion on that. And Blake posted a pic in the Discord of Brock Nelson and says that's a face only a mother could love. He really has a hate on for Brock Nelson. He's mentioned it a number of times. I don't really understand it, but I mean that's the nature of hating someone for no rational reason. So I have an exercise for us. So I'm going to guess who yours is.
Okay, well,
and you can guess who mine is.
I want to say something before you guess. Okay.
Okay.
I really only hate one player in the NHL, and I'm not alone in hating him, but I don't hate him for the same reasons that everybody else does. He is a
Oh.
completely hateable player. People absolutely hate him. Okay. Now,
Okay.
I hate a certain player's face,
Yeah, yeah, I think we're on the same page here. So
but
it's Alexis Lafreniere.
I hate his face, but I don't
Yeah.
hate him as a hockey player. I do hate his
Okay.
face. I hate seeing his
Interesting, because
face in fantasy hockey apps. His face is so punchable. But the
but
player that I actually hate, tons of people hate. I just don't hate him for the same reasons.
okay. So now I'm not 100% sure. Is it Brad Marchand? Brad
No, so
Marchand?
that's completely
Okay.
rational. And here's the thing: I'm going to give you disclosure on the player that I actually hate because I had to come up with a player that I hate for no rational reason. The player that I really truly hate is Corey Perry.
Okay, yeah. I that came as you were saying that. I'm like, oh, it's Corey
I
Perry.
I
Yeah.
fucking hate Corey Perry. I blame Corey Perry for us losing uh, in the Stanley Cup. I hated when he came to Dallas. I hated him before he came to Dallas. I hate him right now. I hate Corey Perry with an absolute passion, but there are completely rational reasons why I hate Corey Perry and why other people hate Corey Perry. So you're going to have to guess the player that I hate for no rational reason.
Oh, you have another one?
I had to come up with one because I mean, there's a
Oh
caveat, no,
no.
no rational reason. So you're gonna have to guess it. I mean, I guess you already did though, because I really hate Lafreniere's face. So I think you know what, I came up with one, but you
Well,
you, you already
now I want to know who the other guy is. Now I'm
well,
curious because I actually have no idea.
give me a guess.
Oh no. Okay. Who's someone? I'm trying to think of like a division rival of the Stars or something.
No, that would be a
Uh
rational reason.
oh no. Okay. Shit. I have no idea, man. I don't know.
I hate Johnny Gaudreau,
Oh, John Gaudreau.
and here are my non-rational reasons. Okay.
Okay.
I am from Texas, right? And when he became Johnny Hockey, he became Johnny Hockey because of Johnny Football. And I hate Johnny Football. I hated him when he was at A&M. I hated him in person when I saw him in real life. I hate him to this day. He's tried to buy my parents' home twice in Tyler, Texas, where his
Really?
entire family is from. Yeah, a bunch of his family lives in that same neighborhood, and my parents live on like a buku wealth street in that city, but they don't have a buku wealth house, right? It's just one of those lots where somebody's like, yeah, I'm gonna buy that and tear your crappy house down, and then I'm gonna put a giant house next to all my cousins and uncles and aunts and etc. Right? By all accounts, he is a super nice guy at this point in life. I've heard wonderful things about him from family members. But I hate Johnny football, and thus I hate Johnny hockey. Also, of all of the friggin' places in the world that he could have gone, he chose to play in Columbus. And it ruined fantasy hockey prognostication it made Calgary way worse. And he could have been on an excellent team somewhere else doing great things and being a 100-point player. And instead, he chose to wilt away and die in Columbus, Ohio. So I hate him for a variety of reasons.
Do you remember? I don't know why this story made me think of this, but do you remember Matt Cook, like that piece of shit hockey player? He played for Vancouver and Pittsburgh. He's the guy that severed Erik Karlsson's
Okay.
Achilles
Yeah.
tendon.
I was like, why do I know that name? Yes.
He ended Mark Savard's career. Essentially, like, got suspended a million times. Was just a really dirty player. He's from Belleville, Ontario. And there's a golf course. There's a par 3 golf course that's pretty close to my house, and they have a driving range, and it's one of the better driving ranges in the area. They had a covered, covered driving range, and he owned a house along the side of the driving range, like behind the mesh. You know how well, some driving ranges, I guess. Okay, more context here. There are houses along the left side of the driving range. So they've put up this mesh so that if people slice to the left, it just hits the mesh,
Right.
and it doesn't hit the houses. But people used to, because they knew that Matt Cook's house was over there, they used to turn and aim right at his house and shoot over the mesh and try and hit his house with golf balls because people hated him so much.
That's
And
awesome.
he sued the golf course, and they had to like completely change the the orientation of the driving range. They had to shift it over. It's now no longer covered. The covered area where you used to shoot from is still there, but it's not used for anything. It's like it was such trash, and it just made me hate him even more. He's such a piece of shit. I hated Matt Cook. Anyways, there's a rational reason for that. Okay, so, and I actually have seen him there before. I can remember when I was there shooting balls, and he was like talking to the owners, and I don't know if that was like in the midst of the lawsuit or whatever, but that's the story that goes around. I don't actually know that that's 100% true, but that's the story that I had heard. Um, in terms of irrationally hating somebody, I feel like I had a name, and now I can't remember. Okay, why don't you guess?
Okay. All right. Irrational hate for a hockey player. I'm gonna go with Elias Pettersson, and I have no reason why.
No, I
No
love
clue why.
Elias Pettersson. On the right track, a top center for a Western Canadian team.
Damn it!
But it's actually Mark Scheifele. I hate Mark Scheifele.
Oh, see,
I
I
don't
was
know.
like, it's like a white dude, Western Canada forward. I knew it. Oh, it was close.
I mean, and I'm not alone in feeling that way. I have just heard things. I've heard that, and there's no, I don't know, there's no real confirmation for this. We talked about how poisonous the Winnipeg dressing room, it sounded like it was, based on reporters that had been in there, and a lot of reports of the leadership being very toxic.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's part of that leadership group. And there was this video that came out after the Jets beat the Leafs in a really chippy affair last year, where Mark Scheifele in the dressing room, they're like giving away. I don't know. They had like a, oh, you know how people do like
belt or a hat
teams do
or
like,
whatever.
yeah, a belt or a hat or a helmet or something like that. I can't remember what it was. I don't really care. But he was handing it off, and he did this speech. He's just like, nothing better than beating the Leafs, eh? And it's like, it was just the weirdest. It's just like they just couldn't be more in your head, bud. Right? Like you know what I mean? Like it's just, Winnipeg was so bad. Like, that was their Stanley Cup, was a regular season win against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And in the next game they played each other, the Leafs absolutely annihilated them, like 7-2. And it was so, I don't know. I just there's something about this guy I just don't like.
You know what
I
I
don't know what
heard
it is.
on I think it was 32 Thoughts. I heard that um, that Ehlers should be on the power play one and wants to be on power play one, but they play the same position on the power play, and Scheifele won't move over because he just likes it better, and that's what's
Interesting.
keeping Ehlers off the power play.
There you go. There you
So
go. That's
he
not a
does
guy I want to play with.
he does seem like a turd, a
Yeah.
little bit,
N-
a little
That's
stinky.
that's not a guy I want to play with at all. All right, let's move on. Nate asks, would like to hear the best players on each of your rosters that you think you might drop during the playoffs, and maybe talk about how to determine when to drop a stud. What do you think, Banksy? Is there anyone on your rosters who's the best player on your rosters that you would consider dropping in the playoffs?
Well, I mean, to touch on the reasoning behind that, it's really going to be schedule and streak for me, right? Like it's absolutely crunch time, and if a player is super cold, I don't want to find out that they're still cold in a must win matchup. Um, and games played has a lot to do with that as well. I'm going to refer to one league, and I think we talked about this. I believe it was before we went live. In a league, our Keep Three, we call ourselves Experts League, where I just snuck in and clinched the playoffs this last week for the 6th slot. I've got a real roster crunch based on injuries, on players coming back, and just having picked up some great streams that became holds over the last few weeks. So I'm going to go with Elias Lindholm
That's a
and
good pick.
Pavel Buchnevich and possibly Matt Duchene. They're certainly players that are worth holding, that are also right on the precipice of being drops. They're bigger names. From this list, based on this roster, it's probably going to be Lindholm, but emotionally, it'll probably be Duchene or Buchnevich based on the quality of the team and the position that they're playing for me.
Yeah. Duchesne was a guy that I was considering saying. I think Nate and I talked about this on the pod on Sunday, but Nikolai Ehlers is probably the best player that I would consider dropping at this point just because of where he is in the lineup and how he's playing lately. Now, he does have an assist tonight. He had an assist in the last game as well with 5 shots. So it seems like he's kind of picking things up, even though his ice time has decreased quite a bit. He had 14 minutes the other night. He's up to almost 16 minutes tonight, and there's still 7 minutes left. So I don't know. Maybe things are turning around a little bit. I don't know how he's being deployed tonight. I don't know if things have changed at all. But yeah, I mean that's definitely a guy that I'm watching closely. I have him in a Bangers Cats league, and I think I don't think Winnipeg has the best schedule over the playoff week. So that's definitely a factor when you're thinking about dropping a stud. Is team schedule, and then actually like level of desperation. Like if you're nearing the end of the week, and it's do or die, you're maybe going to lose, or you're in danger of losing, and you need to pick somebody up that's playing multiple games, or that's playing. If your guy's not playing and he hasn't been playing well lately, then maybe you're considering dropping him just to stay alive. Like that does happen. So obviously I have a strong aversion to dropping studs, but at this point it's do or die. So he's a guy that I would be considering. Duchene's another one. And those are just guys on my roster. Like I'm sure there are others that are kind of on the bubble there.
For those of you listening that are wondering about the Winnipeg Jets schedule, in week 22, not terrible, normal schedule. In 23 and 24, really bad. 6 games played, 1 off night. I mean, as bad as it gets. So,
Yeah.
especially considering how poorly the Jets have been playing, how much they've been getting scored on, and how much bonus tends to overcorrect when his team is really kind of has a ton of atrophy defensively. It really wouldn't shock me for that not to change very much for him. So
Lucas Raymond with a goal tonight. I just checked. That's my drop didn't age super well. I still stand by it though.
yeah,
Big guy in the house 29 asked okay, basically what I was gonna ask, who are you gonna cut out if it's Sunday and you need a stream? How far will you go to get a streamer in your lineup? My team is completely full of people I would never drop. I guess that's kind of the same question. That's a pretty similar sentiment. So
yeah.
we'll maybe move on from that one. Thank you for the question, big guy in the house 29. Um, Fantasy hockey professor Mike, also known as Mr. C on YouTube. He had a question here. It's pretty much the same question that he had in the Discord, so we'll read that one. It's a little more detailed. Fellas, in my relatively shallow but competitive league, 10 teams points, my drops are contingent on schedule maximization. Other than my core guys, Tage Thompson, Connor McDavid, Timo Meyer, and Igor Shesterkin. Wow, that's a nice core. Who is on my can't cut list. No one is really off limits. The players I could drop include Jeff Skinner, Otter, Petro, and or Ekblad. I have Tage and Tuck on the IR at the moment, and I shy away from having more than 2 players from one team, even if it is the entire top line on Buffalo. The Sabres have a good late playoff schedule, so I may have to break that self-imposed rule and keep Skinner. Bottom line, minus my core, it's all schedule contingent. Thanks, and looking forward to tuning in. All right. So that was a bit of a mouthful. I feel like yeah, for and then in the YouTube he asks, "Hi guys, I qualified for a first week bye, so my playoffs are weeks 24 and 25. Ad ideas. I already have Tage, Skinner, and Tuck who's on the IR. Quinn still. And then and then he says it's me, by the way, fantasy hockey professor. We got you, buddy. We got you. So I think in terms of weeks 24 and 25, I looked at the schedule here. We've got Arizona with 4 games and 3 off nights, so definitely some interesting targets there. Colorado has 4 games with 4 off nights. They don't have as many attainable guys. Like I think people have probably scooped up a lot of Colorado Avalanche players,
Yeah,
at least the fantasy
absolutely.
relevant ones. So for me, I would be targeting Arizona Coyotes guys for those at least week 24 and 25. So guys like Nicky Schmaltz, Barrett Hayton, I think is a
Mhm.
guy that's been red hot and is slowly getting on people's radars. But he has kind of solidified his spot in between Keller and Schmaltz, and that line has been really, really good the last month. So those are guys that I would be strongly considering for weeks 24 and 25. In terms of, I don't know if this is the same. I assume that this is the same team that you're talking about.
Yeah,
Players that you could drop. Skinner, Otter, Petro, and or Ekblad, I'd probably be considering Petro.
I think it
And I
has to be. I think it has to be Petro in this case because
yeah,
with Otter, Wedgwood is day to day with an injury. So if there's even a chance that Otter just plays all of the games, then you can't drop a top 5 goalie like that.
yeah,
Skinner, regardless of schedule, is not a player that I want to drop, and with the schedule, it's absolutely not a player I want to drop. And Nate touched on this on the Sunday show with you. Ekblad has elite underlying stats right now, and
yep,
the team itself, the underlying stats are excellent. He's getting great minutes. Like that's just a player that you want. I don't know that you love dropping Petro, but like you said, it's schedule contingent, and they do not have a great playoff schedule. So it's really not a close race for me there. I think you're absolutely on the right track as ad candidates from Arizona. I also really like ad candidates from Boston. If you could say get your hands on Bertuzzi, if you could get your hands on DeBrusque, those are players that I would be looking at. I don't know if Orlov is an option for you in leagues. If come playoff time, it's probably being snapped up, right? People are paying really close attention right now, but he just hit the power play and he's been on a massive streak since coming over. And I liked him before he went to Boston. So the situation has gotten better. He's on a hot streak. I would definitely be looking at Boston players as well, especially the second level Boston players, because they would be really stupid to keep redlining their top players as they don't need to.
Bobby Orlov, baby. Yeah, in terms of second tier Boston players, David Krejci is a guy that seems to be available in a lot of leagues, and that's a guy you probably want to be
especially
picking
in a points league. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Especially in a points league.
Definitely. And then our last question's from the Mark Skinner. I picked Nate's brain about this, and I'm curious to see what you guys think. Who would you drop in a points league that has some but very little value for hits and blocks? Boldy, Keller, or Line? I currently have Meyer still on my IR and have to activate him for the playoffs next week. It's a good complaint, but those guys are the bottom of my roster. Playoff weeks 22 to 24. Thanks again, fellas. So for me, out of these three, so I'm looking at schedule. Minnesota has a terrible schedule from weeks 22 to 24. They have one of the worst. They only have 9 games over those 3 weeks. And Arizona has one of the best, and I believe Columbus is up there as well. So even just schedule, even just based on schedule, I would say Boldy is your drop. But even regardless, in a vacuum, I think Keller is so hot right now. We mentioned that when we were talking about Schmaltz and Barrett Hayton. Those three have been so good in Arizona. And then Patrick Line, I mean, I have a hard time dropping him at all, just because he just had, even if he's not like the most consistent player in the world and he's playing on the worst team in the league, essentially, he still puts up points. Like this guy, and he puts them up in bunches, and he could potentially be a league winner.
Yeah, he could win your week in a single game. So
yeah,
I think you're absolutely on the right track. The inconsistency with Boldy is what would lead me to drop him. And as we've established, I love Matt Boldy. I do. I think he's a phenomenal hockey player.
Yeah.
But he was an advocated drop for me earlier in the season based on consistency, right? So come playoff time, you cannot afford for you to have an inconsistent player. The schedule for Keller, like you mentioned, top of the line, right? So he's the player that I would absolutely stick with. Line is what Boldy is, but better with slightly better deployment. So you got to stick with Line as well. You know, it's like you said, it's a nice problem to have, but yeah, you're going to be dropping Boldy, and I think that's a nice answer for Nate's question. Like, what's the best player that you're going to have to drop just based out of what you're seeing? I mean, Matt Boldy is one of those types.
Yeah, and I just to touch on that, I don't even think it's really Boldy as a player that's a problem, or the I don't even fault him as like being in a sophomore slump or whatever. I think the way that Minnesota is built, he just doesn't have anyone to play with. He plays on the top power play, but 5-on-5, like,
yeah,
he's been on the second line with, I mean, his centers have been, I mean, he played with Ryan Hartman briefly, but a lot of the time it's been like Freddie Gaudreau and
trash
Duhaime guy that keeps popping up into the top 6. I don't know who that is. Like, just not great for a guy that's still trying to find his way in the NHL. I think Boldy's going to be a fantastic player. I just think that they need a little bit more to put around him in order for him to flourish. So in dynasty leagues, I'm not moving off Boldy at all. I think he's going to be amazing. But in terms of winning your weeks, going into the playoffs and redraft leagues, I think definitely a guy that you could be considering cutting bait on at this point. Well, that is all we have for today. Check out the Apples and Genos Discord server. Shoutouts to the band They're There for providing our music. Their Spotify link is in the episode description. Give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Binksy is at Binklemania. Nate is at Apples Genos. Blake is at Blake Creamer SE. And I'm at Just Josh and 41. Please practice safe stats and happy streaming. Have a good one, folks.
Good night, world.